You think you know the person sleeping next to you. You share a life, a home, your deepest fears, and then one day you realize you're sharing your life with a stranger. A carefully constructed stranger. My name is Mark, and for 23 years I believed Claire was my soulmate. We built what I thought was a good life. A comfortable home, financial security, the kind of quiet, steady love you see in old movies. But love, I've learned, can be the perfect disguise for poison. It started with the headaches. Not the normal kind you shake off with aspirin and a glass of water. These were deep, throbbing pains that settled behind my eyes and refused to leave. Then came the dizziness. I'd stand up from my desk at the architecture firm and the room would tilt. I blamed stress, blamed age. Claire was always there, sympathetic, with a cool cloth for my forehead, a fresh glass of water by the bed. "You work too hard, Mark," she'd say, her voice soft with concern. "Let me take care of you." And I let her. I welcomed it, but my health kept slipping. Blood tests came back with strange irregularities, unexplained weight loss. A tremor in my hands so slight I thought I was imagining it. My doctor was puzzled. I was 58, fit, no family history of neurological issues. He ordered more tests. Claire sat beside me in the waiting room, holding my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Or so I thought. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I came home early from a cancelled site visit. Claire wasn't expecting me. The house was quiet. I found her in the kitchen, not preparing dinner, but standing at the counter with her back to me, her shoulders tense. She was pouring a white powder from a small, unlabeled jar into my designated protein shake blender bottle. She didn't hear me come in. When she turned, her face was a mask of practiced calm, but her eyes held a flicker of something cold. Something I'd never seen before. "Just some new vitamins the health store recommended," she said smoothly, too smoothly, "for your energy." I nodded, played along, drank the shake later with a smile. But that was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. I began to watch. Not like a jealous husband, but like a detective in his own life. I noticed she only made my coffee a certain way, always from a specific French press she reserved just for me. I saw the way she'd watch me drink it, her gaze intent, analyzing. I found receipts in her purse for cash purchases at a herbalist across town, items not listed on our shared credit card statements. And then, one night when she was out with her book club, I searched her private sewing room, the one place in the house that was solely hers. Tucked inside a box of embroidery thread, behind a false bottom, I found them. Small brown glass bottles with handwritten Latin names. Foxglove, monkshood. I didn't need a medical degree to know what those were. Slow, cumulative poisons that attack the heart and nervous system. Mimicking the symptoms of a mysterious, degenerative illness. The betrayal was a physical blow. It hollowed me out. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a calculated, long-term project. My mind raced back over the years. The revised will she gently insisted we update after my last health scare, leaving everything to her. the life insurance policy she'd pushed to increase. The way she'd slowly isolated me from old friends, framing it as concern for my well-being. Every piece of kindness, every act of care was recontextualized into something monstrous. She wasn't nursing me. She was curating my decline. So I started my own project. I became an actor in the play she had written. I feigned worse fatigue, more confusion. I let her believe her plan was working. But secretly, I began to gather evidence. I bought a hidden camera for the kitchen, disguised as a digital clock. I took photos of the bottles with my phone. I started discreetly disposing of the contaminated food and drinks, pretending to consume them. I opened a separate bank account and began siphoning off small, untraceable amounts of our joint savings. I was building my case, brick by brick, while she thought she was building my coffin. The man I was, the trusting husband, the grateful patient, was dying, and a new man was being forged in the fire of that betrayal. A colder, sharper, more patient man, and he was preparing for the day the trap would finally spring shut on her. The charade became my new reality. Every morning, I'd wake up and put on the mask of the ailing husband, while inside, a cold, watchful intelligence was taking root. I'd shuffle to the breakfast table, let my hand tremble just slightly as I reached for the orange juice she'd poured. Clea would watch me, her expression a perfect blend of wifely concern and something else. A subtle satisfaction. A hunter watching its prey stumble deeper into the snare. I'd drink the coffee she made in that special French press, the bitter taste now layered with the knowledge of what was in it. I'd swallow it down, along with my rage. I learned to excuse myself to the bathroom shortly after, to quietly, silently, induce vomiting. It was a degrading, humiliating ritual, but it was my secret act of defiance. My body was a battlefield, and I was finally fighting back. The financial web she'd woven was even more insidious than the poison. While pretending to nap one afternoon, I accessed our shared computer, my heart thudding a dull, angry rhythm against my ribs. I found the files, spreadsheets she'd hidden, detailing projected inheritance payouts, life insurance disbursements, and the timeline for transferring all our assets into her name alone. She had it all mapped out. My death wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a corporate takeover of a life we'd built together. She'd even looked into selling my share of the architecture firm, had preliminary, hushed conversations with my partner, framing it as a necessary step due to my failing health. Every dollar, every piece of the future I'd worked for was already spent in her mind. The humiliation was a hot, acidic wash. I had been reduced to a line item on a balance sheet, my value measured only by my absence. I began to document everything with the meticulous focus of a surgeon. The hidden camera in the clock captured her every move in the kitchen, the careful measuring of powders, the specific cleaning of my blender bottle, the way she never, ever consumed anything from it herself. I recorded our conversations on my phone, baiting her with feigned weakness. "I just don't understand what's wrong with me, Clea," I'd murmur, my voice weak. And she'd stroke my hair, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The doctors will figure it out, darling. Just rest. Let me handle everything." Those recordings were chilling. To anyone else, it sounded like a devoted wife. To me, it was a confession. I stored the digital files in multiple encrypted locations, a digital arsenal growing in the shadows. The turning point didn't come with a shout or a slammed door. It came in the dead of night, lying beside her, listening to the soft, even sound of her breathing. I was staring at the ceiling, my body thrumming with a toxic cocktail of betrayal and a newfound, icy clarity. The man who loved her was gone, a ghost murdered by her calculated kindness. What was left was something harder. Something capable of waiting, of planning. The emotion didn't vanish, it was merely repurposed. The love I'd felt was now fuel. The hurt was a whetstone sharpening my resolve. Revenge wasn't a hot, impulsive burst of anger. I saw that now. True revenge was a cold engine. It required patience. It required proof. It required her to be utterly, completely, and publicly exposed. I started testing the waters of my escape. I began moving more significant sums of money, using complex online transfers to a newly created offshore account, layering the transactions behind dummy corporations and old client invoices. I contacted a private investigator I'd used for corporate due diligence years ago, communicating through a secure, anonymous email service. I gave him the herbalist's name, the dates from the receipts. I needed to know her sauce. I needed to build a chain of evidence that would be unbreakable in a court of law. Every step was a risk. A single misplaced email, a single curious glance at a bank statement, and the entire fragile house of cards would collapse. I was living on a knife's edge, my nerves stretched wire-tight, but the fear was a familiar companion now. It kept me sharp. It kept me focused. The final piece fell into place on a rainy Thursday. The investigator's report arrived. It wasn't just an herbalist. It was a disgraced, former pharmacist with a history of selling unregulated substances. He had records. He had sworn statements obtained under the pretext of a different investigation. Claire had been a regular customer for over 18 months. She'd paid in cash always. The timeline matched my decline perfectly. Holding that report in my hands, the weight of it felt solid. Real. This was no longer a paranoid theory. It was a premeditated murder plot, and I had the blueprint. I sat in my car in the empty parking garage, the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, and for the first time I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The evidence was assembled. The financial safeguards were in place. The stage was set. All that was left was to choose the moment, to look into the eyes of the woman I'd shared my life with and show her the reflection of the monster she'd created. The performance was almost over. It was nearly time for the final act. The moment arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a lock. I chose a Sunday morning. The house was filled with the soft, golden light of a perfect autumn day. The kind of day we used to spend reading the paper on the patio, wrapped in the comfortable silence of a long marriage. Now that silence was a lie, and I was about to shatter it forever. I had already taken my final precautions. The bulk of our liquid assets were secure in an account she could never touch. Copies of all the evidence, the videos, the audio recordings, the financial records, the investigator's report, were in the hands of my lawyer, my business partner, and the district attorney's office, set to be delivered simultaneously at a specific time. There was no going back. The trap was no longer mine. It was the law's, and it was already sprung. I just had the privilege of watching her walk into it. I found her in the sunroom, sipping her tea, looking serene and utterly in control. She smiled when she saw me, that gentle, concerned smile that had been my prison for so long. "How are you feeling today, Mark?" she asked, her voice like honey. I didn't answer with words. I placed the slim, black folder on the glass table between us. Then I placed my phone beside it, the screen showing a paused video of her at the kitchen counter, carefully stirring a white powder into my coffee. Her smile didn't falter, but it froze, becoming a brittle, porcelain mask. Her eyes flicked from the phone to the folder, then back to my face. The concern in them evaporated, replaced by a slow-dawning, icy comprehension. I opened the folder. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I narrated, my voice flat and calm, like a news anchor reporting on a distant tragedy. I laid out the evidence piece by piece, a curated exhibition of her betrayal. The photos of the brown glass bottles, the spreadsheets detailing her financial windfall upon my death, the receipts from the herbalist cross-referenced with the pharmacist's sworn statement. I played the audio clips of her false sympathy, her manipulative reassurances. I watched as the color drained from her face, as her hands began to shake, clattering her teacup against its saucer. She tried to speak, to summon a denial, but the evidence was a wall, and she had built every brick of it herself. There was nothing left for her to say. The perfect performance was over, and the audience had seen the monster behind the curtain. The sound of the doorbell was my cue. I didn't move. I just watched her. The facade finally crumbled, revealing the raw panic and fury beneath. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I remained seated, my posture relaxed. "I've simply stopped you," I said, "and I've documented the attempt." The front door opened. I had given my lawyer the key. He entered with 2 police officers. Their presence made it all real, final. As they read her rights, her eyes locked with mine. There was no plea, no apology, just a look of pure, undiluted hatred. I met it with a gaze of absolute, emotionless stillness. I felt nothing. No triumph, no sorrow. Just the quiet hum of a difficult job, finally completed. In the weeks that followed, the legal machinery ground on with a satisfying, inevitable rhythm. She was charged with attempted murder, fraud, and a host of other crimes. The evidence was so overwhelming her lawyer advised a plea deal. I didn't attend the hearings. I'd seen all I needed to see. My health, once I was free of the constant, low-grade poisoning, returned with a surprising swiftness. The tremors stopped, the headaches vanished, the weight returned. My body, it seemed, had been waiting for its chance to heal. I sold the house, the site of so much silent treachery, and moved into a clean, modern apartment with a view of the city I helped design. The silence there was my own, and it was peaceful. The money I'd secured was more than enough. I took an early retirement from the firm, not as a broken man, but as a liberated one. I found I had no interest in the frantic pace of my old life. I started traveling, not to escape, but to rediscover a world that wasn't filtered through the lens of suspicion. I learned to enjoy my own company, to trust my own instincts again. The betrayal had scarred me, yes, but it hadn't broken me. It had, in a strange way, reforged me. It burned away a certain naivete, a blind trust I'd carried my whole life. I learned that the most dangerous prisons don't have bars. They have familiar faces and gentle words. I sometimes think of her in her very different, very real prison. I feel no pity. The justice she faced was merely the external echo of the internal sentence she passed on herself the day she decided my life was a price she was willing to pay for her comfort. My revenge was never about hurting her. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about proving that patience and proof are more powerful than poison and greed. The man who loved Clea is gone, a casualty of her ambition. The man who survived her is quieter, wiser, and utterly free. I look out at the city lights now from my quiet apartment, and I feel a profound sense of closure. The tale is told. The balance is restored. Some stories end not with a wedding, but with a quiet, solitary peace, and that, I have found, is a far more satisfying ending. Have you ever had to question everything you thought was true about someone you loved?